there are women who elevate other women, right? The work that they've done, their history, their glass ceilings that they've broken. And Megyn Kelly was reflecting on the life of the late Barbara Walters. I want to play you a bit of what she said on her show. I think it airs on Sirius. I want you to tell me, and Kim, as a fellow woman, what you hear in what Megyn Kelly has to say here, and whether or not you agree with her. Here again is Megyn Kelly.
She made it in a time when women weren't being taken seriously and when it was very hard to be considered as a serious news person, right? So like, and all of us who have come in her wake owe her a debt of gratitude on that front. And it's one of the reasons why my admiration for her, I bought her autobiography, Audition, several years ago. Well, I actually read that book cover to cover. I read every word in it. And I was deeply disturbed by what I saw. What I saw was an incredible person professionally, and I would never take one moment of that away from her, but a woman who completely fell down on the job when it came to her mothering. And it was jarring to me, her admissions about her own mothering, and also what her book said without her seeming to realize it about her lane there as a mom. She talked about how she adopted a little girl she named her Jackie after Barbara's sister. And the daughter never saw her mother. And basically, Barbara Walters, according to her own book, was barely mothering this child. And then she writes about how the daughter, so weird, started to have all these behavioral issues. And it was like, well, I sent her off to that boarding school, and that didn't work. That was weird. And then that didn't work. That was weird. It was like, hello. I'm channeling my pal, Dr. Laura, right now. I mean, she needed one good phone call with Dr. Laura, and she would have seen exactly what was going wrong with this kid. And I had my producer, Debbie, Canadian Debbie, pull this for me because there was one line I remember. This is from the book. She talks about Jackie, who she adopted in 1968. And Barbara writes, I telephoned whenever I could. And she's on the road all the time. Like, she was with Fidel Castro. She wasn't with Jackie. I telephoned whenever I could. I told Jackie I missed her and I loved her dearly. And I asked the nanny to turn on the Today Show before Jackie went off to nursery school so she could see her mommy in that strange land called China. Then I hung up the phone, felt even lonelier, and went back to work. Okay, she's saying here she felt lonely. Elsewhere, she admits she never felt lonely. She was alone, but not lonely. She loved her career. She thrived on it. It's the same as Mike Wallace, who was a shitty father to Chris Wallace. And Chris and Mike have talked about it and written about it, but a great journalist. You know, and each of us that has a demanding career has to decide for him or herself just how much to give to each lane. You have to work to find the balance. She never found it. She never found it. And to me, it was a sad story about the sacrifice of what truly matters for, I think, the ultimate artifice of fame, money, accolades.
So what do you think about what she's saying right there? Do you think the same thing would be said? I know she mentioned, Mike Wallace and Chris Wallace, okay? And how they've hashed it out and things like that. Mm-hmm. But do you think it's fair to bring something like that up, given who Barbara Walters was, what her job was, and how many times, in my opinion, you could have had that conversation with so many other men who did the exact same thing. But because, once again, she's a woman, that it's a failure for her. Now, someone was asking in the chat, was she married? Yeah. Barbara Walters adopted Jackie with Lee Guber, Guber. And they were married from 1963 to 1976. And that's when they adopted Jackie. I don't know where he was during this whole time that Megyn Kelly, I did not read Barbara Walters' books. So I don't know that. But whether Jackie was with the dad or not, or just with nannies or what have you, Barbara wasn't there. And she's admitted it. She gave an interview where she basically said exactly what Megyn Kelly was saying. Um, and, Barbara Walters said in an interview in 2014, I was so busy with the career. It's an age old problem. And, on your deathbed, are you going to say, I wish I spent more time in the office? No. You'll say, wish I spent more time with my family. And I do feel that way. I wish I had spent more time with Jackie. But I think that anybody will say that, regardless of gender, right? Regardless of whether you're a mom or a dad. Most people, especially if you have a very demanding, let alone high profile career,
Mhm.
is always going to say that, right? Because there's never enough time. You can't do it all. No matter how many people claim to try, something has to give. It just always will be that way. You're fooling yourself if you think you can give 100% to everything, your family, your job, yourself. That's not. Something has to give. You decide your priorities, and they could change year from year and moment to moment, right? Sometimes you need to be like, I'm under the hood. I got to do this. I'm sorry. I got to tap out of that. I'm doing these things. Thank you, Michelle Crocker, with the $2 donation in the super chat. It's the old double standard. Again, I feel like we could have had this conversation with so many very successful men that have high profile jobs, and yet it doesn't come up enough. It doesn't. And I don't think it's fair, but I don't think she's wrong, if that makes sense. I think that
She's
Barbara
not
Walters does
wrong,
regret
but
it.
this is where it hit me first, and David says it better. Speaking ill of the dead is never a good look, at least wait a bit. It may be completely true. And
Right.
as Barbara Walters said many times about her daughter, she has
Right.
regrets. She, like you were mentioning, she has said that has done things wrong and that she would do things differently or whatever it is. The woman just died.
Yeah.
So, let's remember Barbara Walters for what she gave to us. And, if you want to talk about down the road, people who have put their career before their family or who have made mistakes, fine. But right now, she's just passed away. So
Yeah.
let's look back at, I guess when you look back at people's lives, do you want to only remember the good things or do you want to remember the
Mm.
good and bad? I don't know. I just feel
Yeah.
like it's a little speaking ill of the dead, and it rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also who it's coming from, right? Megyn Kelly, who, and I don't even know, I think Megyn Kelly has children. She's focused on her career as well. Um, John writes, Barbara put it in her book, but Kelly was just bringing it up at the wrong time. I think there are
Yep.
plenty of famous men who are crappy fathers and get lambasted for it. Probably, but I don't think in the same way necessarily. I feel, again, my opinion, I feel like when men, whether they passed away or retire, whatever,
Mhm.
he didn't spend a lot of time with his children, but look at all of the great things that he did, and maybe Megan Kelly is trying to say it in that way. It just doesn't come across to me that way. It seems like, but she failed, and it's this failure, it's this guilt that women constantly feel, whether
Yeah.
alive or dead, that they're just not enough. They're
Mhm.
just not enough. And it's never going to be enough. And I think Barbara Walters, while on one hand, personally, I'm sure she has some regrets. Uh, like I said before, when you have a career like hers, something had to give.
Yeah.
And she wasn't giving up the career. Megyn Kelly had also said something interesting about how, and I don't think I included it in that clip though, how she wasn't really close to any of her colleagues. Like, she worked with them, and yes, she brought up all these women, but on a personal level was kind of lonely. You know who else I heard that about from people that knew him personally? Rush Limbaugh. Obviously very successful, although a
Mhm.
very hateful kind of man. But yeah, very successful man, but lonely, very, very lonely, being a big house all by himself. And I don't know if it's a certain type of person that breeds, but I can only imagine that, you know, if
Yeah.
you're going for success, you're letting other things fall to the back burner, and that's
You know what I
relationships.
what I think about Megyn Kelly is that it's the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done to you. So
Mhm.
when Megyn Kelly dies, does she want people to remember to go back and look at all the mistakes she made as a parent? Is that what she
Mm.
wants? Is that is
I'm
that what she
I
wants
feel like they're
people
going to be bringing up a lot of stuff about Megyn Kelly that has nothing
Is
to
that
do
what
with
you
her
want?
children.
So no, if that's not how you want to be treated after you pass away, then why would you do that to someone else?
That's a very good point. Now, JR was asking, asking us, Kim, if we feel we've given up time with our children to further our own careers.
Mm.
Um, no. And I mean, obviously, I haven't been there for every, after school performance. There's things that I've missed. It becomes harder. It has led me to say no to certain career opportunities because, so for instance, years ago, before I even went to KGO, I was offered a position at KFI in Los Angeles. And it was a huge opportunity. I had just purchased a house in Sacramento and I had just had my first child, my daughter. And I remember flying into LA for the interview. And no offense if you live in LA, but like you see that level of smog that you just like fly into. And not looking at it, I mean, it happens. But I just remember looking around and walking down the street, and I knew I didn't want to live there. I was
Yeah.
away from any of my family, all of my support system. My husband would have to change jobs, and I just had this little girl. And thankfully, a couple of years later, I got another job opportunity in San Francisco at Station X, which actually was my dream job. I did my college internship there. I'd always wanted to work there, and it worked for me. I mean, I moved my way up. I'll say this though, kind of on a personal level, there was a point right after my son was born, the first year I was at Station X, or yeah, it had to be my first year at Station X. I really wanted to move to back to being a reporter. They had moved me quickly to being an evening anchor, and it was hard because I was dropping my kids off in the morning and then not seeing them till the next morning.
Yep.
And so that lasted, I don't know how long I did. What I did evening, probably 8 months or so. I don't even think I did it a year before I moved to afternoons, something like that. And I remember going to one of our old bosses and I asked him and he said, no, I need you on evenings. And it was devastating. I was so upset. Thankfully it worked out. And then although I hated the hours, I really hated the hours. Morning show drive, that
I
was
was
the
gonna
best
say,
schedule ever. It
that's
was
the
hard.
reason. There was a reason you and I were on the mornings together,
Yeah.
because we have husbands or family members that are in place that could drop the kids off at school, and we were home for pickup and all
Mhm.
afternoon activities and dinner time and bedtime.
Yeah.
The early morning drive in TV and radio is great if you're a parent.
Yeah.
So when I had that shift, I don't feel like I missed very much. But there were other times when I had the afternoon shift when I couldn't volunteer like I wanted to, you
Yeah.
know?
And it's
Uh,
tough.
yeah. And I don't necessarily think my kids will come in the room while I'm on the air with you, and I will kind of shoo them out like I'm on the air, but because they don't really need anything other than, can I play a video game, or
They want to
"Wh-"
be seen on the show. Come
They
on.
do. But I don't feel like that is not spending time with my kids. They can be okay for a couple hours on their own.
Oh
They're
God,
they're
yes.
they're fine. I'm home with them. I'm here with
You're
them.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the best scenario for
Mhm.
us. I
Mhm.
really think
Absolutely.
allows us
Absolutely.
to be here when we're needed.
Exactly.
And that morning drive, that was okay. But there have been times where I was like, "Hey, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make sure that everybody gets where they need to be, or how am I going to make sure that I volunteer and they see me volunteering in their classrooms when I have to be, at Station X all day." So
Right.
but you know what? I'm not the only person, because if you have to work, and in the Bay Area,
You
everybody
have
needs
to
a
work.
two-income household, right? You
Exactly.
have to work. So, I mean, it's just the way of the world. I mean, you have to make money for your family, and it's always going to be a balance.
It is, and it's not going to always be equal or fair with whoever your partner is.
Yeah.
If you have a partner, I mean, I can't even imagine if I was doing it on my own, if I was a single parent or something like that. It's tough. It's not easy to, especially live in a high cost area like the Bay Area, to make everything work, because it's not as if I could look at my husband and be like,
Yeah.
"Okay, honey, I'm not going to work anymore.